The biting January wind howled through the empty streets of Silver Springs, Colorado, carrying with it snowflakes that danced through the air before joining the thick blanket of white that covered the ground. Emma Sullivan watched through the steamy window of her small bakery as she adjusted her worn shawl around her shoulders. The aroma of the last bread of the day still hung in the air, mixing with the smell of wood burning in the stone oven. At 26, Emma already knew the weight of loneliness. 2 years had passed since she lost Robert, her husband, to a fever that had ravaged the region. The bakery, once a shared dream, was now their only source of livelihood and, ironically, their biggest source of worry. Debts were growing as fast as the snow piling up outside. A movement on the street caught his attention. A lone figure walked through the storm, staggering against the merciless wind. The man, she could see now that it was a man, looked exhausted, his clothes covered in snow and dust from the road. Something in his hesitant gait made her rise from her chair by the oven. William Hartley did not plan to stop at Silver Springs. As the owner of one of Denver's largest railroad companies, he was traveling incognito to inspect possible routes for his new rail line. The disguise of a common traveler was necessary to prevent land prices from rising astronomically in his presence, but the storm and hunger forced him to seek shelter. The doorbell jingled as he entered, bringing with it a blast of icy air. Emma immediately noticed his aristocratic features, partially hidden by a stubble and simple clothes covered in snow. "Forgive me, ma'am." His voice was husky but polite. "I came from far away and haven't eaten in 2 days. Would you have anything to sell?" Emma looked at the only bread hogaza left, her own meal for the night. Her eyes met his, a deep blue that contrasted with the dust from the path on her face. "Sit by the oven, sir," she said, indicating the wooden bench. "The last loaf is still warm." William protested when he realized it was the last, but Emma insisted, breaking the bread in half and offering him a generous portion with a little butter. The gesture took him by surprise. In his years running businesses in Denver, he rarely encountered such genuine kindness. While they ate in companionable silence, William discreetly observed the environment. The bakery was small but impeccably clean, although signs of wear and tear were evident in the peeling walls and worn furniture. On the counter, an open ledger book revealed pages full of numbers in red. "Do you manage this establishment alone?" he asked, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Yes," Emma replied, a slight tremor in her voice. "Since my husband passed away. It was our dream, you know. We built it together, brick by brick." William noticed the pride in his voice, even when he spoke of the difficulties. It was clear that the bakery meant more than just a business to her. "Times are hard," she continued, more to herself than to her visitor. "The bank threatens to foreclose on the mortgage if I can't pay the arrears by the end of the month." William felt his heart tighten. As a businessman, he knew the bakery needed urgent investment to survive, but something in Emma's silent pride prevented him from offering immediate help. When the storm subsided, William said goodbye, promising himself that he would find a way to help this extraordinary woman without hurting her dignity. Emma watched him leave, not knowing that this encounter would change her life forever. Over the next few weeks, William couldn't get Emma out of his thoughts. The image of her, proud even in the midst of difficulties, sharing her last bread with a stranger, haunted him. He spent days developing a plan that could save the bakery without looking like charity. In Denver, sitting in his plush office overlooking the snowy mountains, William finally made his decision. He would return to Silver Springs, this time as himself, with a business proposal that could save Emma's bakery. But first, I would need to earn his trust, and more importantly, his respect. What William didn't expect was that his heart, so long focused only on numbers and business, would start to beat faster every time he thought about Emma's kind smile and the strength she showed in the face of adversity. Emma, in turn, continued her daily struggle. Each morning, before the sun rose, I lit the oven and prepared the bread dough, as I had done alongside Robert for so many years. The debts continued to mount, but she refused to give up on the dream she had shared with her husband. Often his thoughts returned to that stormy night and to the mysterious traveler who had broken his bread. There was something in his blue eyes, a gentleness mixed with strength, that intrigued her. But Silver Springs was just a tiny dot in Colorado's vast territory, and the chances of seeing it again were slim to none. What Emma didn't know was that fate sometimes has plans of its own, weaving its webs in mysterious ways through the Colorado snowstorms, bringing together lives seemingly destined to remain apart. And so, as the winter of 1875 took its relentless course, two lonely hearts prepared for a reunion that would change not only their individual destinies, but also the future of all of Silver Springs. 2 weeks after that stormy night, the situation at Emma's bakery was getting worse every day. The intense cold reduced the flow of customers, and debts to the bank weighed like lead on their shoulders. That morning, while organizing the almost empty shelves, the doorbell announced the arrival of a customer. "Good morning, Mrs. Sullivan." Emma froze when she recognized the voice. He was the traveler of the stormy night, but he was completely transformed. Instead of his dusty clothes, he wore an elegant three-piece suit. His beard was trimmed, and his previously disheveled dark hair was carefully combed. "You're back," she said, trying to hide her surprise. "But it feels different." William smiled, approaching the counter. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. William Hartley, of the Hartley Railroad Company of Denver." The blood drained from Emma's face. Everyone in Colorado knew the name Hartley, the railroad magnate who was expanding his business throughout the territory. The man with whom she had shared her last loaf was one of the richest men in the West. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Emma asked, an accusatory tone in her voice. "I often travel undercover to evaluate new investments without attracting attention," William explained, maintaining a gentle tone. "But that's not why I came back. I came to make a business proposal." Emma crossed her arms, suspicious. "What kind of proposal?" "I'm expanding my network of suppliers to the railroad camps. I need fresh bread to feed hundreds of workers." William paused, studying her reaction. "Your bakery has exactly what I'm looking for: quality and dedication." Emma's heart quickened. A contract of this size could save her business, but pride prevented her from accepting what clearly seemed like charity in disguise. "Mr. Hartley, I appreciate the offer, but I don't need your pity," she replied, lifting her chin. "It's not pity, Mrs. Sullivan. It's a legitimate business arrangement," William insisted, pulling a contract from his leather briefcase. "I studied your accounting books that night. Your bread is exceptional, and your management is efficient. The problem is a lack of working capital and a limited clientele." Emma felt her face burn. "Did you snoop through my books?" "I'm a businessman, ma'am. Evaluating opportunities is my job," he replied with a smile that disarmed his defense a little. "Besides, your kindness that night impressed me. People like that are rare in the West." Silence filled the bakery as Emma struggled internally. The contract could be their salvation, but accepting help from a stranger, even under the guise of business, seemed like a betrayal of Robert's memory and everything they had built together. "I need time to think," she finally said. "Naturally," William replied, leaving the contract on the counter. "I'll be staying at the Harrison Hotel for a week. But remember, the bank won't wait forever." After his departure, Emma spent hours studying the contract. The terms were more than generous: a sizable down payment, fair prices, and a 1-year purchase guarantee. It would be foolish to refuse, but something in his heart resisted. That night, alone in her room above the bakery, Emma took Robert's ring from the dresser drawer. It was his ritual when he needed to make difficult decisions. "What would you do, my love?" she whispered to the ring. "We built this together, but now Now I have to decide alone." The distant sound of the night train echoed through the valley as if it were a signal. Emma remembered Robert's words about adapting and surviving in the West. "Sometimes too much pride can be our undoing," he used to say. The next morning, Emma walked into the Harrison Hotel with the contract in hand. He found William at the restaurant, eating breakfast alone while reading the newspaper. "I accept your proposal," she said, sitting across from him without being invited, "but on one condition." William lowered the newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "And what would it be?" "I want to expand the bakery. Not just supply your workers, but create my own distribution network when the railroad is ready. I need your business guidance, not just your money." A genuine smile lit up William's face. "You just made the proposal even more interesting, Mrs. Sullivan." As they finalized the details of the deal, Emma couldn't help but notice how William's blue eyes sparkled when he talked business. There was a passion there that went beyond simple profit. It was the same kind of brilliance that Robert had when talking about the bakery. "We'll start tomorrow," William said as they said goodbye. "I have some ideas for modernizing your equipment." "Mr. Hartley," Emma called as he walked away, "thank you for not giving up on me." William stopped, turning to face her. For a moment he looked like he was going to say something more, something beyond business, but he just nodded with a restrained smile. That afternoon, Emma felt renewed energy as she prepared the bread. The aroma of yeast and fresh flour filled the air, mingling with something new: hope. For the first time since Robert's death, the future didn't look so bleak. But as she worked, Emma couldn't help but think of William Hartley. There was something about him that intrigued her, a mixture of strength and gentleness, of business astuteness and genuine compassion. He was the kind of man who could be dangerous to a widow who had promised herself never to fall in love again. What Emma didn't know was that, in her room at the Harrison Hotel, William was also thinking about her, admiring her strength and determination. The railroad magnate, accustomed to dealing with numbers and contracts, found himself fascinated by a simple baker who had dared to impose conditions on his generosity. And so, as the snow continued to fall gently over Silver Springs, two lonely hearts began a partnership that promised to be much more than a simple business arrangement. With the signing of the contract, Emma's small bakery began its transformation. William wasted no time in initiating the promised improvements. In less than a week, a new industrial oven arrived from Denver, capable of baking 3 times as much bread as the old one. The kitchen gained a modern mechanical mixer, and shiny metal shelves replaced the old wooden ones. Emma watched the changes with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Each piece of old equipment removed seemed to take with it a piece of her memories with Robert. One particularly difficult morning, William found her sitting on the back steps of the bakery, holding an old dented loaf pan. It was his favorite, she explained without looking up. Robert always said that the bread baked in it had a special taste. William sat next to him, keeping a respectful distance. "You know, we can keep some old parts. Not everything needs to be replaced." Emma finally looked at him, surprised by his understanding. "You must think me a sentimental fool." "On the contrary," William replied softly, "it's these memories that make your bread so special. It's not just flour and water. It's history. It's love." Those words touched Emma deeply. It was the first time someone seemed to truly understand what the bakery meant to her. The moment of intimacy was interrupted by the arrival of Mary Bennett, the official gossip of Silver Springs, who entered through the front door ringing the bell. "Emma Sullivan!" Mary exclaimed, her eyes shining with curiosity when she saw William. "So the rumors are true. The great William Hartley is indeed investing in our little town." William stood up, adjusting his jacket with natural elegance. "Mrs. Bennett, I presume? Emma mentioned that you especially enjoy your cinnamon buns." Mary blushed with pleasure at being recognized, but Emma noticed the calculating gleam in her eyes. He knew that by the end of the day, all of Silver Springs would be speculating about the nature of the relationship between the young widow and the wealthy businessman. The following weeks brought a different routine to the bakery. Emma quickly learned to operate the new equipment, while William instructed her in accounting books and business strategies. Their lessons often went on late into the night, with the two of them sitting next to the lamplight, heads together over spreadsheets and contracts. It was during one of these nights that the first shipment of bread left for the railway camps. Emma watched proudly as the men loaded the boxes onto the cart, each containing dozens of carefully packaged fresh loaves of bread. "This is just the beginning," William said, standing next to her. "We'll soon need more help. Have you thought about my suggestion about opening a branch in Denver?" Emma hesitated. The idea of expanding beyond Silver Springs scared and excited her at the same time. "I don't know if I'm ready for something that big." "Yes, it is," William stated with conviction. "You have the necessary talent and determination. You just need to believe in yourself as much as I do." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Emma felt her heart speed up and quickly looked away, pretending to organize papers on the counter. The following Sunday, William surprised her with an invitation to lunch at the hotel. Emma accepted after some hesitation, aware of the curious looks that followed them along the way. The restaurant at the Hotel Harrison was the most elegant establishment in Silver Springs, with white linen tablecloths and silver cutlery. Over lunch, William talked about his own story, how he built his railroad empire from nothing, the hardships he faced, the sleepless nights worrying about debt. Emma realized that, despite his current position, he completely understood her struggles. "Why are you actually helping me, Mr. Hartley?" she finally asked, placing her fork on her plate. "And please be honest." William studied her for a long moment before responding. "Initially, it was your kindness on that stormy night. No one had ever shared their last loaf of bread with me without knowing who I was. But now," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "now it's because I see in you the same passion I have for business, the same determination to build something meaningful." "Just that?" Emma pressed, sensing there was more behind her words. William's gaze softened. "Ms. Sullivan? Emma? I think we both know there's more than just business between us." Emma's heart raced, and she felt her face burn. "Mr. Hartley, William," he interrupted her gently. "Please call me William." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Carson, who approached his desk with a worried expression. "Mr. Hartley, forgive the intrusion, but I need one word in particular. Troubling news has arrived from Denver about some of your competitors." William frowned, but maintained his composure. "Excuse me, Emma. I won't be long." As the men walked away to talk privately, Emma watched William, noticing for the first time the tension in his shoulders, the weight of the responsibilities he carried. He wasn't just the rich businessman everyone saw. He was a man with his own fears and battles. That night, alone in her room, Emma allowed herself to think about the future for the first time since Robert's death. The changes in her life were scary, but also exciting. The bakery was growing, her dreams expanding beyond what she had ever imagined possible. And then there was William. Emma couldn't deny the attraction that grew between them, the way her heart raced whenever he was around. But would it be possible to open your heart again? And most importantly, would she be ready to face the challenges that a relationship with William Hartley would certainly bring? The distant sound of a train cut through the night, echoing through the valley, as a reminder of the larger world that waited beyond the confines of Silver Springs. Emma fell asleep thinking about fresh bread, railroads, and blue eyes that seemed to see right through her soul. The news spread through Silver Springs like wildfire. William Hartley's competitors were plotting against his interests in Denver. For days, Emma watched the growing concern on his face as he sent and received urgent telegrams, always maintaining a controlled expression that no longer deceived her watchful eyes. One particularly cold morning, Emma found a Denver newspaper forgotten on the bakery counter. The headline made his heart sink. Railroad tycoon Marcus Sterling vows to destroy Hartley empire. The article detailed accusations of shady business practices and hinted at connections to corrupt politicians. "You shouldn't believe everything you read in the newspapers." William's voice sounded from behind her, making her startle. "And truth?" Emma asked, turning to face him. "These accusations?" William sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that she already recognized as a sign of frustration. "Marcus Sterling is my former partner. Years ago, I discovered he was embezzling company money into gambling and illicit businesses. When I confronted him, he swore revenge." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to involve you in my problems," he replied, moving closer. "Emma, I need you to know that my interest in helping you has always been genuine. But now, Sterling is using our association to attack me." As if to confirm her words, Mary Bennett burst through the bakery door, waving another newspaper. "Emma, have you seen this? They're saying Mr. Hartley is using small bakeries to launder dirty money." The blood drained from Emma's face. The idea that his bakery, Robert's legacy, could be embroiled in scandal was unbearable. William took a step forward, his stance exuding authority. "Ms. Bennett, I suggest you be more careful about what you repeat. Defamation is a crime, and my lawyers would love to sue certain newspapers and gossip mongers." Mary paled, muttering apologies before beating a hasty retreat. As soon as they were alone, Emma turned to William. "I need to know the whole truth now," she demanded. "What else are you hiding from me?" William hesitated, but Emma's determined look left no room for evasions. "Sterling isn't just after my money. He wants revenge because I was engaged to his sister, Catherine. She died in a train accident 5 years ago, and he blames me for that." Emma felt the weight of that revelation. Suddenly, many things made sense. The occasional melancholy in William's eyes, his almost obsessive dedication to railroad safety. "The accident wasn't your fault, was it?" she asked softly. "Not directly," William replied, his voice full of ancient pain. "But I should have been on that train with her. We had fought, and I chose to travel the next day. If I had been there—" Emma touched his arm gently. "You can't blame yourself forever." The moment of vulnerability was interrupted by the sound of horses' hooves. Through the window, they saw 3 well-dressed men dismounting in front of the bakery. Sheriff Carson hurriedly crossed the street to meet them. "They're government investigators," William explained tensely. "Sterling must have been able to launch a federal investigation into my business dealings." "What can we do?" Emma asked, surprising herself with the use of "we can." "I should leave," William said, but his reluctance was evident. "My presence here will only harm you." "No," Emma replied firmly. "I'm not going to let Sterling destroy another life. If he wants war, we'll give him a war." William looked at her with admiration and something more, something that made Emma's heart race dangerously. "Emma Sullivan, you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met." In the following weeks, the bakery became a different battleground. Emma and William worked tirelessly to document each transaction, proving the legitimacy of their business arrangement. The Silver Springs community, initially hesitant due to the rumors, began to rally behind them when they saw how the partnership was bringing prosperity to the city. One afternoon, while reviewing documents, William caught Emma looking at Robert's portrait on the wall. "He would be proud of you," William said softly. "How you're fighting for what you built together." Emma felt tears in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I'm betraying your memory, not just for business, but—" She didn't complete the sentence, but William understood. Slowly he approached, taking your hands in his. "Love again is not a betrayal, Emma," he said gently. "It's proof that the heart can heal and grow." Before Emma could respond, shouts from the street caught her attention. A group of men gathered in front of the bank, and in the center was Marcus Sterling himself, his imposing figure dressed in an expensive suit. "It seems the battle has just begun," William muttered, his countenance hardening. Emma squeezed her hand. "Then we will face it together." The sun was setting over Silver Springs, painting the sky blood red. A storm was approaching on the horizon, but this time Emma felt no fear. I had learned that some storms brought not only destruction, but also the chance for a new beginning. And as she watched William prepare to face his past, Emma realized she was ready to face her own future, whatever that might be. Marcus Sterling's arrival in Silver Springs brought with it a wave of tension that seemed to electrify the air of the small town. Tall and imposing, with his expensive attire and eyes as cold as steel, he was quick to make his presence felt. In less than a week, he set up a temporary office at the local bank and began pressuring merchants who did business with William. Emma watched with growing concern as some of her older customers began to avoid the bakery. Sterling had spread rumors that anyone who had business relations with William Hartley might face difficulty obtaining bank loans. "We can't let you bully people like that," Emma told William on a particularly difficult afternoon after 3 families canceled their weekly orders. William was hunched over his desk, examining telegrams from Denver. "Sterling has always been an expert at manipulation. He destroys reputations like other men smoke cigars, with pleasure and without remorse." "Then let's expose who he really is," Emma suggested, her tone determined. "There must be proof of the wrongdoings he committed in the past." William looked up, a gleam of admiration in his gaze. "I have documents in Denver that could incriminate you, but—" At this moment, the bakery door opened violently. Marcus Sterling entered, followed by 2 menacing-looking men. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. "What a touching scene," he mocked, looking from William to Emma. "Has my old friend found another heart to break?" Emma felt William stiffen beside her. "Sterling, this is between us. Leave Mrs. Sullivan out of this." "Oh, but she's already involved, isn't she?" Sterling circled the bakery, gloved fingers skimming the clean counter. "First Catherine, now this lovely widow. You have an interesting pattern, William." "Get off my property," Emma ordered, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. Sterling laughed, a humorless sound. "Your property? For how long, dear? The bank is reconsidering all loans related to Hartley's business. It would be a shame if your little bakery—" "He arrives," William advanced, but Emma stopped him with a touch on his arm. "Mr. Sterling," she said, remaining calm, "you may have money and influence, but you don't have the right to destroy what other people have built with honest work. If you want revenge, there are courts for that." "Courts?" Sterling scoffed. "Like the ones who acquitted William after his incompetence killed my sister?" "Your sister died in a terrible accident," William replied, pain evident in his voice. "I loved her, Marcus. You're not the only one carrying this loss." For a moment, something seemed to flicker in Sterling's eyes, a shadow of humanity behind the mask of vengeance. But it passed quickly, like lightning in the desert. "You have a week, William," he said coldly. "Sell your railroad shares to me, or I will make sure every person you've helped, every business you've supported, every dream you've nurtured is destroyed, starting with this bakery." After he left, a heavy silence fell over the room. Emma was the first to break it. "You can't give in to his blackmail," she said softly. William ran his hands over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. "I can't risk other people suffering because of me. I've already caused too much pain." "William," Emma approached, taking his hands in hers, "look at me. You are not responsible for Catherine's death, any more than you are responsible for Sterling's bitterness. Some people choose to drown in revenge rather than learn to swim in pain." He looked at her, touched by the wisdom of her words. "How can you see so clearly through all of this?" "Because I have also known the pain of loss," she replied, "but I chose to honor Robert's memory by continuing our dream, not destroying it." At that moment, something changed between them. William pulled Emma closer, his hand gently touching her face. "You make me want to be a better man," he whispered. "You're already a good man," she replied, her heart thundering in her chest. The moment was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A stone had been thrown through the bakery window, bringing with it a tied note. William took it, his face hardening as he read it. "Sterling's men are threatening the railroad workers. They need me in Denver immediately. Then I'll go with you," Emma declared, surprising them both. "It's too dangerous," he protested. "More dangerous than losing everything I built? Than seeing you give up everything you achieved?" She began to pick up the broken glass from the floor. "Also, those documents that could incriminate Sterling, we need to get them." William watched her for a long moment, admiration and concern mixed in his gaze. "You're really not afraid of anything, are you?" "I'm afraid of a lot of things," she admitted, straightening up. "But I've learned that some things are worth the risk." Their gazes met, loaded with unspoken meaning. William took a step forward, closing the distance between them. This time, when her lips met Emma's, there were no interruptions. Just the warmth of a long-awaited kiss, full of promise and possibility. When they separated, Emma smiled softly. "I think we just gave Mary Bennett something new to gossip about." William laughed, the rich, genuine sound dispelling some of the tension of the moment. "Well, she'll have to wait to spread the news. We have a trip to Denver to plan." As they prepared for the journey that awaited them, Emma knew they were crossing the point of no return. The future was uncertain, full of danger and challenges, but for the first time since Robert's death, she felt truly alive, and ready to fight not just for her bakery, but for a new chance at love. Night fell over Silver Springs, and with it came the promise of change. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Sterling planned his revenge, but he would discover that he had underestimated the strength that is born when two hearts decide to fight together. The trip to Denver was planned to begin at dawn. Emma left the bakery in the care of Martha, a local widow she had recently hired, after instructing her in detail about every aspect of the business. The news of her departure with William generated a wave of whispers throughout the city, but for the first time, Emma didn't care what others thought. The morning air was chilly when the stagecoach arrived. William helped Emma climb in, his gentle touch on her waist sending goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cold. Inside the vehicle, they found two other passengers, a sleepy Methodist minister and an elderly woman who was watching them with barely concealed curiosity. "Miss Sullivan!" Mary Bennett's shrill voice cut through the air as the stagecoach prepared to leave. "Is it true that you are going to face the terrible Marcus Sterling?" William leaned out the window. "Ms. Bennett, I suggest you pray for us instead of spreading rumors. Silver Springs will need all the prayers it can get in the coming days." As the stagecoach left town, Emma watched her bakery dwindle into the distance. It was the first time he had been so far away from Silver Springs since Robert's death. The feeling was bittersweet, a mix of apprehension and excitement at the unknown. "Are you sorry?" William asked softly, noticing her thoughtful expression. "No," she replied firmly, "just thinking about how life can change so quickly. A few months ago I could barely keep the bakery running, and now he's traveling to Denver to face one of the most powerful men in the territory," William added, a hint of concern in his voice. The journey was long and arduous. The bumpy road shook the stagecoach violently, and stops to change horses were brief and uncomfortable. During one of these stops, at an isolated trading post, Emma overheard a disturbing conversation between two station employees. "Sterling sent armed men to all the main roads," one of them whispered. "It's hunting Hartley like a wolf after its prey." William also heard it. His face remained impassive, but Emma noticed how his hand tightened on the handle of the revolver in its holster. When they returned to the stagecoach, he pulled her close, speaking in a low voice. "If something happens, I want you to promise that you will go to Denver alone. My lawyer, Charles Montgomery, will be waiting at the central station. He has copies of the documents and will know what to do." "I won't leave him," Emma protested, but William silenced her with an intense look. "Emma, I need to know you'll be safe. I can't lose another—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. "I can't lose you too." The moment was interrupted by screams and the sound of horses' hooves approaching quickly. The coachman whipped the horses, increasing the speed of the stagecoach. Emma was thrown against William when the vehicle made a sharp turn. "Bandits!" the coachman's scream echoed. William took out his revolver, exchanging a quick look with Emma. "Stay down." Shots began to crackle, ricocheting off the wood of the stagecoach. The elderly woman screamed prayers while the pastor tried to calm her down. Emma felt her heart race as William opened the window and returned the fire. "These are Sterling's men," he shouted between shots. "I recognize your company colors on the scarves." The chase continued for several tense minutes, with the stagecoach bouncing dangerously around the curves. Emma grabbed the bag containing important documents from the bakery, using it as a makeshift shield as wooden shards flew after a particularly close shot. Suddenly, one of the stagecoach horses stumbled, causing the vehicle to tilt dangerously. William grabbed Emma, shielding her with his body as the stagecoach finally overturned. The world spun violently, and for a few moments all Emma could register was William's weight on top of her and the sound of splintering wood. When the dust settled, she found herself lying on the side of the road, with William still hugging her protectively. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes roaming your body, looking for bruises. "I'm fine," she replied, trying to sit up. "The others?" The pastor was already helping the elderly woman out of the wreckage. Miraculously, no one appeared seriously injured, although the coachman had a cut on his forehead. The attackers had disappeared, probably believing they had achieved their objective. "That was just a warning," William said darkly as he helped Emma to her feet. "Sterling wants to scare us, make us give up." Emma brushed the dust off her dress, her resolve only strengthened by the attack. "He doesn't know us very well, then." William looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Emma Sullivan, you are the bravest woman I have ever met." "It's not courage," she replied, grabbing her bag from the wreckage. "It's stubbornness. My mother always said I was too stubborn for my own good." A group of horsemen approached. This time they were lawmen from a nearby town, attracted by the gunfire. While William explained the situation, Emma watched the horizon. Denver was still a ways off, and Sterling certainly had more surprises in store for them. But something had changed during that attack. The fear Emma felt was no longer for herself or the bakery. It was for William, for her safety, for her future. Somewhere between Silver Springs and that dusty road, she had fallen completely in love with him. The local sheriff offered an escort to the next town, where they could catch another stagecoach. As they rode slowly down the road, William stayed close to Emma, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for threats. "You know," she said softly, "Robert always said that God never gives us more than we can handle, but sometimes I wonder if he doesn't overestimate our strength." William smiled, reaching out to hold her hand. "Maybe it's not about how much we can bear alone, but about finding someone to share the burden." The sun was beginning to set when they reached the next town, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The journey to Denver was far from over, and the dangers had only just begun. But as William helped her dismount, his eyes meeting hers with a silent promise of protection, Emma knew there was no other place she would rather be. Sterling might have money, power, and armed men, but they had something stronger: each other and the determination to fight for what they believed in. And sometimes, Emma thought, that was all it took to change the world, or at least her little piece of it. Denver towered before them, a pulsating city that contrasted sharply with the tranquility of Silver Springs. Emma gazed in wonder at the tall red brick buildings, the busy streets, and the elegant carriages that passed by. William, however, was tense, his eyes constantly scanning the vicinity for threats. "Montgomery's office is 3 blocks away," he said quietly, guiding Emma through the crowd. "Stay close. Sterling has eyes everywhere." As they walked, Emma noticed how people greeted William respectfully, although some looked away when they saw him. The rumors spread by Sterling had already left their mark even here, in the heart of the Hartley Empire. The lawyer's office was in an austere 3-story building. Charles Montgomery greeted them with obvious relief, a small, nervous man with round glasses and graying hair. "Thank God they arrived safely," he said, locking the door behind them. "Sterling has caused hell. 3 board members have already sold their shares to him, and the banks are putting pressure on the remaining investors." William nodded gravely. "The documents?" Montgomery crossed the room to a safe built into the wall. "Here they are. Records of all the embezzlements Sterling made, including bribes to judges and politicians. But—" he hesitated, looking at Emma. "She can hear everything," William stated. "I trust her completely." The lawyer sighed. "There's more. I found out something about Catherine's accident." He took a yellowed folder from the safe. "The driver of that train? He was bribed to cause the derailment." Emma felt William stiffen beside her. "What?" "Sterling planned it all," Montgomery continued. "He knew you had discovered his deviations and was going to expose him. The accident should have killed you, not Catherine. She shouldn't have been on that train." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. William staggered to a chair, his face pale as paper. Emma knelt beside him, holding his hands in hers. "William," she called softly, "look at me." His eyes, when they met hers, were filled with old pain and new fury. "He killed his own sister," William whispered. "All this time, he blamed me. When did he—" A shot shattered the office window. Montgomery fell, hit in the shoulder, as William pulled Emma behind a bookshelf. More gunshots followed, and voices shouted in the street. "The documents!" Emma exclaimed, seeing the papers scattered near the injured lawyer. William drew his revolver. "Stay here." But Emma was already moving, crouched down, quickly gathering documents as bullets whizzed over her head. William provided cover, exchanging fire with the shooters on the street. "Montgomery," she called, crawling over to the lawyer. "Can you walk?" He nodded weakly, pressing down on the wound. Emma helped him to his feet, using the bookshelf as protection. "There's a back exit," Montgomery gasped. "Through the basement. Leads to the alley." William reloaded his revolver. "Emma, take him and the documents. I'll create a distraction." "No!" She grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving him here." "I'm not asking," he replied firmly, but his eyes softened as he met hers. "I need you to be safe. You're all I have left." Before Emma could protest, William pulled her into a desperate kiss. It was brief and intense, filled with unspoken promises and unspoken fears. "Go," he whispered against her lips. "I'll meet you at the St. James Hotel, room 302. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight by her side, but Montgomery's groan of pain brought her back to reality. With a heavy heart, she helped the injured lawyer through the basement door, the precious documents safe in her bag. The tunnel was dark and damp, echoing with the distant sounds of gunfire above. Emma guided Montgomery through the darkness, her hands sliding along the stone walls. The lawyer murmured directions between gasps of pain. When they finally emerged into the alley, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded them. Emma heard screams and more gunshots coming from the front of the building. "This way," Montgomery indicated a nearby carriage. "The coachman is trustworthy." As they walked away through the streets of Denver, Emma couldn't stop looking back, her heart clenching with worry for William. The documents in his bag seemed to weigh a ton, evidence of Sterling's monstrosity, of his own sister's murder out of greed and revenge. At the Hotel St. James, Emma tended to Montgomery's wound with skill born from years of treating minor accidents in the bakery. The hours dragged by like decades as they waited for news of William. "He's a survivor," Montgomery said softly, noting his anxiety. "He's faced worse." Emma forced a smile, but her eyes never left the window. The truth about Catherine changed everything. Sterling wasn't just a bitter man seeking revenge. He was a calculating killer who would sacrifice anyone for power. The sun was already setting when a knock on the door made Emma jump. His heart stopped when he saw William enter, injured but alive. Without thinking, she ran into his arms. "Don't you ever do that to me again," she whispered against his chest. William hugged her tightly, ignoring the pain from her injuries. "I don't plan to. I've lost too many people I love." The word hung between them, unspoken, but understood. Emma raised her face to meet his eyes, seeing in them the reflection of her own feelings. Night fell over Denver, bringing with it the promise of more danger. Sterling was still out there, his men looking for them. But in that moment, safe in each other's arms, Emma and William found a moment of peace in the midst of the storm. The documents proving Sterling's crimes were safe, but the battle was far from over. Tomorrow they would have to face more challenges, more dangers, but they would do it together, strengthened by the love that had grown between them, a love born of bread shared on a stormy night in Silver Springs. The morning in Denver brought with it a thick fog that seemed to reflect the tension hanging over the city. In room 302 of the Hotel St. James, Emma, William, and Montgomery discussed their next moves. The incriminating documents spread out on the oak table. "Judge Peterson has agreed to see us this afternoon," Montgomery reported, adjusting his bandaged arm. "He's one of the few that Sterling hasn't been able to buy yet." William nodded, his eyes scanning the evidence that revealed the true nature of Catherine's murder. "What about the sheriff?" "I sent a telegram to Silver Springs," Emma interjected. "Sheriff Carson is on the way with backup. He has jurisdiction over the case since the stagecoach attack happened on his territory." The mention of Silver Springs brought a flash of concern to William's eyes. "I hope the bakery is okay." "Martha is competent," Emma assured, touching her arm gently. "And the whole city is on our side now." A suspicious movement on the street caught William's attention. Through the window, he observed 3 suspicious-looking men talking to the hotel doorman. "We need to get out of here," he declared, starting to collect the documents. "Sterling must have bribed someone on the team." The words had barely left his lips when heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Emma quickly put the papers in her bag while William checked his revolver. "By the fire escape," Montgomery whispered, indicating the window. The trio had barely reached the metal platform when the bedroom door was broken down. Emma held her bag tightly to her chest as they hurried down the rusty structure, her heart hammering against her ribs. The streets of Denver were busy, offering both danger and protection. William guided them through alleys and alleys, avoiding the main avenues where Sterling's men were sure to be looking for them. "The courthouse is 6 blocks away," Montgomery gasped, clearly suffering from his injury. "But Sterling will have men guarding all the entrances." "Then we'll create a distraction," Emma declared, an idea forming in her mind. "William, do you still have loyal contacts on the railway?" He nodded, beginning to understand his plan. Most of the workers support me. Sterling never cared about their well-being. Then it's time to show the difference between you two, she smiled, determined. Within an hour, the plan was in action. Dozens of railroad workers, upon receiving William's message, began to gather in front of Sterling's main office, demanding better working conditions and protesting corruption. It worked, Montgomery observed through the window of the warehouse where they were hiding. Sterling's men are leaving the courthouse to deal with the protesters. Emma shook William's hand. It's time. The couple exchanged a meaningful look before heading to the courtroom. Montgomery limped a few steps behind, carrying his lawyer briefcase as if it were just another normal day at work. Judge Peterson welcomed them into his chambers, a tall, thin man with discerning eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. As he examined the documents, his expression became more and more serious. That's disturbing, he muttered, adjusting his glasses. Not just embezzlement, but premeditated murder. A commotion in the hallway interrupted his speech. The door opened violently, revealing Marcus Sterling, his face red with fury and a gun pointed at the group. So this is how it ends, William? He laughed bitterly. Hiding behind a woman and a corrupt judge? The only corrupt one here is you, Marcus, William replied calmly, positioning himself in front of Emma. You killed your own sister. The mention of Catherine made Sterling falter for a moment. She shouldn't have been on that train. You were the one who should have died. And you've lived all these years blaming William, Emma interjected, her voice firm. He turned his guilt into hatred because it was easier than facing the truth. Sterling pointed the gun at her. Shut up. You don't know anything about me or Catherine. I know she would be horrified by what you have become, Emma continued, stepping forward despite William's silent protests. A murderer didn't deserve a brother like that. Sterling's finger twitched on the trigger. For a tense moment, silence reigned in the room. Then the sound of boots in the hallway announced the arrival of Sheriff Carson and his men. Marcus Sterling, the sheriff's voice boomed. He is under arrest for the murder of Catherine Sterling and the attempted murder of William Hartley. Sterling looked around like a cornered animal. His eyes met William's one last time before he tried to shoot. The shot narrowly missed as Carson and his deputies took him down. As Sterling was led away, handcuffed and protesting, Emma threw herself into William's arms. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. It's over, she whispered. No, William replied softly. It's just beginning. Judge Peterson cleared his throat, getting his attention. Mr. Hartley, these documents will be enough to ensure that Sterling never threatens anyone again. As for your company, the railroad will continue to grow, William said. But this time we'll do it the right way, with fairness and consideration for everyone involved. Emma smiled, proud of the man she loved. The shadows of the past were finally beginning to dissipate, revealing a bright future ahead. I think it's time we go back to Silver Springs, she suggested. I have a bakery to run. William looked at her with love in his eyes. Actually, I have other plans for the two of us. That is, if you're interested in a more permanent partnership. Emma's heart sank as she understood the meaning behind his words. But that was a conversation for another time, away from the prying eyes of the Denver courthouse. For now, it was enough to know that justice had prevailed, and that the love that began with shared bread on a stormy night had survived the worst trials that fate could offer. A week after the events in Denver, Emma and William were traveling back to Silver Springs, this time in the relative comfort of a private train car. Sterling's arrest had caused a real earthquake in the Colorado business world, with several of his former allies rushing to make legal deals. Emma watched the familiar landscape through the window, her hands intertwined with William's. The news of their engagement, announced discreetly before they left Denver, must have already reached the small town by telegraph, and she could imagine Mary Bennett running from door to door to spread the news. "Are you worried about the reception?" William asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Not exactly," she replied, turning to him. "Just thinking about how everything changed so quickly. A few weeks ago I was just a widow struggling to keep a bakery going." William smiled, bringing his hand to his lips. "And now she's the future wife of the luckiest man in Colorado." The statement made her blush, but it also brought to light a worry that had been growing in her heart. "William, are you sure? I mean, I'm just a small-town baker. Your world in Denver is so different." "Emma," he interrupted her gently, "when you shared your last loaf of bread with me that stormy night, you didn't care who I was. You showed me that there is genuine goodness in this world, something I had forgotten after Catherine's death." The train slowed as it approached Silver Springs, and Emma felt her heart quicken as she saw the familiar station approaching. A small crowd had gathered on the platform, and she recognized several familiar faces. To his surprise, Martha was at the front of the group, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Beside him, Sheriff Carson and his wife smiled warmly. Even the banker Thompson, who had pressured her so much about the mortgage, was present with a contrite expression. When the train stopped, William helped Emma get off, and applause broke out spontaneously. Martha ran to hug her, tears in her eyes. "The bakery is a success," she exclaimed. "The railroad workers keep ordering, and now that the story about Sterling has come out, everyone wants to buy bread from brave Mrs. Sullivan." Emma laughed, touched by the kindness of her community. William remained at his side, a strong and protective presence, respectfully greeting the residents who approached to congratulate them. "Mr. Hartley," Banker Thompson approached hesitantly, "I would like to express my sincere apologies for the way I treated Mrs. Sullivan, if there is anything I can do to make up for it. You can start by offering fair loans to other small traders," William replied firmly, but without hostility. "Silver Springs needs to grow with the railroad, not at its expense." The walk to the bakery was like a little parade, with people coming out of their homes and stores to greet them. Emma noted with satisfaction that the establishment was immaculate, with a new painted sign and shiny windows. "We've made some improvements," Martha explained proudly. "The whole community helped. After we found out what happened in Denver, everyone wanted to show their support." Inside the bakery, the familiar aroma of fresh bread brought tears to Emma's eyes. On the wall, Robert's portrait still held its place of honor, but now she could look at it without feeling that sharp pain in her chest. In its place was gratitude for the love they shared and the strength he had left her. "He would be happy for you," William said softly, noticing her glance at the portrait, for seeing that their dream not only survived, but grew beyond what they imagined. Emma turned to him, touching his face gently. "Our dream is bigger now, isn't it? The bakery, the railroad, building something that benefits the entire community." William nodded, pulling her closer. "And we'll do it together, our way. No corruption, no greed, just honest work and respect for people." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of visits, congratulations, and planning. Mary Bennett showed up with a group of ladies from the church, all eager to help with the wedding preparations. Sheriff Carson brought news that Sterling had made a full confession, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his days in prison. At night, when they were finally alone, Emma and William went up to the small apartment above the bakery. The modest space that had once felt so lonely to Emma was now overflowing with possibilities. "We're going to need a bigger house," William commented, looking around, "but we can keep this place as it is. It has special meaning." Emma smiled, remembering the first time she had seen him, covered in dust and hunger, asking for bread. "Who knew that mysterious traveler would change my life completely?" "You changed my first," he replied, pulling her into his arms. "It showed me that there was still kindness and true love in the world, even after everything that happened to Catherine." The distant sound of the night train echoed through the valley, a reminder of the changes to come. Silver Springs would grow with the railroad, but Emma was determined to maintain the community spirit that made the town special. "You know," she said, resting her head on William's chest, "we still have to decide where our main base will be, here or in Denver." "How about both places?" he suggested. "We can expand the bakery to Denver, like you wanted, but keep Silver Springs as our true home. After all, this is where we found each other." Emma lifted her face to look at him, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "It looks perfect." The kiss they shared was sweet and promising, sealing not only their love, but also a commitment to the future they would build together, a future that began with a simple act of kindness on a stormy night, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures can be found in the simplest gestures. Autumn has arrived in Silver Springs, bringing with it an explosion of golden colors and an air of renewal. 3 months had passed since Emma and William's return, and the small town was prosperous beyond recognition. The railroad had brought not only progress, but also a constant flow of new residents and opportunities. Emma's bakery, now known as Sullivan and Hartley's Bakery, had expanded to occupy the neighboring building as well. Martha supervised a team of 5 bakers, while Emma divided her time between running the business and preparing for the wedding. On this particular morning, Emma was especially nervous, adjusting the wedding dress that the seamstress had just delivered. Mary Bennett and a group of church ladies had transformed the community hall into a fairy tale setting, with wildflowers and white ribbons decorating every available surface. "It's absolutely perfect," Martha declared, helping Emma with her veil. "William will lose his breath when he sees her." Emma smiled at her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the confident woman she had become. The dress was elegant yet simple, reflecting her personality. Delicate lace combined with sturdy fabric, fit for a woman who wasn't afraid of hard work. "Robert would be proud," she whispered to herself, touching the small medal that had belonged to her first husband and that she would wear as something old at the ceremony. A commotion outside caught his attention. Through the window, he saw an elegant carriage stopping in front of the church. Charles Montgomery came down, helping a distinguished lady Emma recognized from photographs in Denver, William's mother. Eleanor Hartley's presence in Silver Springs was a testament to the change William had experienced. Initially skeptical about her son's marriage to a simple country baker, Eleanor had been won over by Emma's strength and dignity during her visits to Denver. "Honey," Eleanor entered the room after knocking gently, "I brought you something." In her hands was a delicate blue velvet box. Inside, a pearl necklace glowed softly. "It was Catherine's," Eleanor explained, her voice breaking. "She always said it would be worn on the day William found true happiness. I can't think of a more appropriate time." Emma felt tears in her eyes as Eleanor fastened the necklace around her neck. The weight of the pearls seemed to carry not only Catherine's memory, but also her family's ultimate acceptance. Outside, the entire city seemed to have stopped for the wedding. Merchants closed their stores, railroad workers donned their best attire, and even some Indians from the nearby reservation, with whom William had established fair agreements, came to attend the ceremony. Sheriff Carson, who would walk Emma down the aisle, was waiting at the door of the church. "Are you ready, my dear?" Emma took a deep breath, adjusting the bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. "More than ever." The church doors opened, and the music of the small choir filled the air. Emma felt her heart skip a beat when she saw William waiting at the altar, elegant in his dark suit, his blue eyes shining with love and admiration. Every step down the hallway brought back memories of the past few months. The stormy night when they shared their last loaf, the fights in Denver, the truth about Catherine, and finally, building a new beginning together. "Take good care of her," the sheriff whispered as he handed Emma to William. "With my life," William replied, holding Emma's hand as if it were the most precious of treasures. The Reverend began the ceremony, but Emma barely heard the traditional words. She was lost in William's eyes, seeing in them the reflection of her own love and hope for the future. "William and Emma," the Reverend smiled, "have built their union on strong foundations: kindness, courage, and true love. May God bless this union and make it prosper as Silver Springs itself has prospered under your care." Vows were exchanged with firm voices and overflowing hearts. When William slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma felt as if a perfect circle had been completed, not erasing the past, but building upon it an even brighter future. The reception was held outdoors, under elegant tents set up in the central square. The aroma of fresh bread mingled with the scent of flowers, while local musicians played lively tunes. Children ran between the tables, their laughter mixing with the adults' lively conversations. "You see," William murmured in Emma's ear during their first dance as husband and wife, "who knew a man covered in dust begging for bread would end up here?" Emma smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I always knew there was something special about you, even that night." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, guests gathered for a special toast. Montgomery, recovered from his wounds and serving as best man, raised his cup. "To William and Emma," he proclaimed, "who reminded us that a person's true worth lies not in their titles or riches, but in the goodness of their heart and the strength of their character." Eleanor Hartley also stood up, surprising everyone. "To my son and my new daughter, who found each other through the storm and built something more precious than gold: true love and a strong community." As the night progressed, Emma and William briefly escaped to the bakery. The establishment was silent and dark, but filled with memories. "This place will always be special," Emma said, touching the counter where they had shared that first loaf of bread. "This is where our story began." William pulled her into his arms, kissing her softly. "And this is where we will continue to write new chapters. Together." Outside, Silver Springs celebrated not just a wedding, but the triumph of love over adversity, of kindness over greed, of hope over fear. The small Colorado town had transformed, as had its inhabitants, proving that the greatest miracles sometimes begin with the simplest gestures. And so, as the stars began to dot the western sky, Emma and William Sullivan Hartley began their new life together, their hearts as vast as the plains that surrounded them, as strong as the mountains on the horizon, and as true as the love that brought them together on a stormy night when one last loaf of bread was shared. Today, thanks to the vision and determination of my wife, Emma, we are learning to build communities. Emma watched her husband with a new eye as he continued, recognizing in him not only the man she had fallen in love with in Boston, but also someone who had finally found his own voice and purpose. When it was her turn to speak, Emma captured the audience's attention with the same mix of passion and pragmatism that characterized her. "This center is not just a renovated building," she declared. "It's a symbol of transformation, not just for this community, but for all of us who have learned that true change begins when we tear down the walls that separate us." The afternoon progressed with tours of the center, presentations by local students, and lively conversations between members of the business elite and public system educators. Eleanor watched everything with satisfaction, noticing how her daughter-in-law easily navigated between the different groups, building bridges where only walls previously existed. "Impressive, isn't it?" Catherine Walsh commented, joining Eleanor. "How she managed to turn a social scandal into an educational revolution." "Emma always had that ability," Eleanor replied. "We just needed to give her space to shine." At the end of the day, As the last guests left and the team began to organize the space for the first official day of activities, Charles found Emma in her office. She was standing at the window, watching the families still chatting animatedly in the center's courtyard. "We did it," he said softly, standing next to her. "Yes," Emma replied, turning to face him. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" Charles nodded, understanding that she wasn't just talking about the education center, but about everything: their marriage, their partnership, their future together. "I have some ideas for other centers," he commented, "if you're interested in hearing them." Emma's smile lit up her face. "I've always been interested in your ideas, Charles. You just had to be ready to share them." As the sun set over Brooklyn, casting golden shadows across the downtown windows, the Westfield couple stood side by side, finally united not just by name or appearance, but by a shared purpose and a deeper understanding of what it meant to be truly partners. With the success of the opening of the Westfield Education Center still reverberating through the city, Emma found herself in a position she had never imagined when she arrived in New York, at the center of a quiet revolution that was transforming not only a business dynasty, but also the city's very social fabric. A week after the center opened, she received an unexpected call from Rebecca Hamilton of the New York Times. "Emma, I need to do a follow-up story. The center's impact is already exceeding all expectations." It was true. Registration for educational programs had doubled, and other neighborhoods were beginning to show interest in similar projects. But it wasn't just professional success that occupied Emma's thoughts. It was the subtle shift in her dynamic with Charles. "Mrs. Westfield," Martha interrupted her thoughts, entering her office with an antique box. "I found this during the last cleaning of the west wing of the mansion. I thought you might like to see it." The box contained letters, dozens of them, exchanged between Preston Westfield II and Eleanor during the early years of their marriage. Emma picked one up carefully, recognizing her mother-in-law's elegant handwriting. "My dear Preston," she read in a low voice, "I know you fear that my work in art education might tarnish the Westfield name, but I ask that you trust me. Sometimes the greatest legacy we can leave is not the one we build in steel and concrete, but the one we plant in people's hearts." Eleanor's words, written decades ago, resonated with startling truth in the present. Emma put the letter away carefully when she heard familiar footsteps approaching. "I thought I'd find you here," Charles said, stopping at the door. He seemed different the last few days, more relaxed, more present. "I have something to show you." He led her to his car, and together they drove through Manhattan until they arrived at a historic building in Greenwich Village. "This building has been in the family for generations," Charles explained as they walked up the stairs. "I never really knew what to do with it, but after the success in Brooklyn..." Emma took in the expansive space with its elegant arches and tall windows. "It's perfect for an arts center," she finished her thought. "Exactly what my mother said when I showed it to her." Charles smiled. "In fact, this is where she took her first art lessons, before my father convinced her to stop." The moment carried significant weight. It wasn't just about a new project, but about Charles finally embracing his family's full legacy, including the parts his father had tried to suppress. "Why are you showing me this now?" Emma asked softly. Charles approached one of the windows, watching the activity on the street below. "Because I finally understand something you've always known, that true strength comes not from controlling narratives, but from allowing them to unfold naturally." That evening, during an intimate dinner at Eleanor's penthouse, 3 generations of Westfield transformation gathered to discuss the future. Catherine Walsh was also present, her discerning eye observing the family dynamics with interest. "The Arts Center in Greenwich Village," Eleanor commented, pouring herself some wine, "is an interesting choice, Charles. Are you sure you're ready to fully embrace the family's artistic legacy?" Charles exchanged a look with Emma before responding. "Actually, I was thinking about naming it after you, Mom. The Eleanor Westfield Art Center. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Eleanor set down her glass, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Your father would never have allowed that. I'm not my father, Charles replied simply, and it's high time we honor all parts of our history. Catherine Walsh watched the scene with satisfaction. You know, Eleanor, when you began your work in art education in the 1980s, many said it would be the end of the Westfields. Now look where we are. Your daughter-in-law expanding your legacy in ways no one could have predicted. Emma absorbed the conversation, realizing how the stories of 3 generations of Westfield women intertwined in a complex pattern of challenge, resistance, and transformation. Victoria Bennett had been just a symptom of a larger problem, Westfield men's generational fear of being overshadowed by extraordinary women. The true power of the Westfields, Eleanor declared, raising her glass in a toast, has always been in the women the men of the family chose, even when they tried to hide it from us. Charles accepted the comment with a humility that would have been unthinkable a few months ago. To transformation, he proposed, raising his own glass, and to finally learn the lessons that were in front of us all along. As the night progressed and the conversation flowed, Emma realized that she was witnessing not just a family reconciliation, but the birth of a new era for the Westfields. An era where strength did not mean control, where legacy was not just measured in square meters, and where the shadows of the West Wing finally gave way to the light of full recognition. The first rays of November sun found Emma in her new office at the Eleanor Westfield Art Center, still under renovation. She watched workers installing nameplates in classrooms as she reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. The New York Times had published an extensive report that morning on the Westfield's transformation, highlighting how a public school teacher had revolutionized one of Manhattan's biggest real estate dynasties. Thoughtful so soon? Charles's voice surprised her. He was standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee from the little Italian cafe they used to frequent on their first dates in Boston. Just taking it all in, Emma replied, accepting the coffee. Sometimes it feels surreal how we got here. Charles approached the window, watching Greenwich Village awaken. I found something interesting in the old company files last night, he commented, removing a yellowed envelope from his inside jacket pocket. It's a letter from my grandfather to my grandmother, Charlotte, written shortly before he passed away. Emma approached, curious. The letter, dated 1975, revealed a side of the Westfields that Charles had never known. My dear Charlotte, he read aloud, as I watch our son Preston forge his own path, I fear he has inherited only half the lesson I tried to teach. He learned about business and power, but has forgotten that our true strength has always come from the extraordinary women we choose as partners. The silence that followed was filled by the distant sound of New York waking up. Emma gently touched Charles's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. Your grandfather seems to have been a wise man. Wiser than your son or grandson, Charles admitted with a sad smile. But it's never too late to learn, right? The day unfolded in a series of meetings and decisions about the new center. Eleanor arrived around noon, bringing with her Catherine Walsh and a group of the city's respected art curators. The contrast between Westfield's traditional corporate environment and the creative energy of the developing art center was palpable. It's fascinating to see how you are integrating elements of the past with a modern vision, commented one of the curators, admiring the original 19th-century arches that had been preserved in the renovation. Eleanor watched with pride as Emma and Charles presented the project together, their voices naturally complementing each other as they described their vision for the space. There was no longer tension or competition between them, just a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. You know, Catherine whispered to Eleanor during a calmer moment, When you told me about your plan to use the ball scandal to force change, I confess I had my doubts. But look at them now." Eleanor smiled, remembering nights of planning with Emma at the Four Seasons, preparing each move like an elaborate game of chess. Sometimes we need to completely break something to build it back stronger. In the afternoon, Emma received an unexpected visitor. Victoria Bennett stood in the doorway of her office, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Can I come in?" Emma indicated the chair in front of her, keeping her expression neutral. Victoria had lost some of her previous social luster. Her designer outfit was still impeccable, but there was a new humility in her posture. "I came to apologize," Victoria began, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Not just for the obvious, but for not recognizing your value from the beginning. You turned Westfield into something I could never achieve, even with all my social pedigree." "I didn't come to transform the Westfields, Victoria," Emma replied calmly. "I came to be myself. The transformation was just a natural consequence of that." When Victoria left, Charles entered, having witnessed the meeting from afar. "You're a better person than I'll ever be," he commented, approaching Emma. "It's not about being better or worse, Charles. It's about being authentic." Emma stood up, organizing some documents on her desk. "Do you remember that first night in Boston, when you walked into the library looking for shelter from the rain?" Charles smiled at the memory. "You were teaching an evening literature class for adults, talking about Jane Austen with such enthusiasm that it made me want to learn all about Pride and Prejudice. And you sat in the back row, trying to go unnoticed in your soaked Armani suit," Emma added, laughing softly. "That night, you weren't the Westfield heir. You were just a man interested in classical literature." The moment was interrupted by Martha's arrival with the latest reports from the Brooklyn Education Center. The numbers were impressive. The impact on the community was already measurable after just a few weeks of operation. "The council has scheduled a meeting for tomorrow," Charles reported, leafing through the reports. "They want to discuss expanding the program to other neighborhoods." Emma nodded, already familiar with the nuances of Westfield corporate politics. "And how do you feel about that?" "Honestly?" Charles stared at her with an intensity that was reminiscent of their first days together. "For the first time in my life, I feel like we are building something that goes beyond square feet and market value. We are creating a real legacy." The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emma and Charles stood in silence for a moment, watching the city through the historic windows of what would soon be the Eleanor Westfield Arts Center. It wasn't just a building being renovated, but a symbol of how love, when true, has the power to transform not just two people, but entire generations. Autumn in Manhattan had given way to winter, and the first snow of the year was gently falling over the city when the Eleanor Westfield Center for the Arts opened its doors for its official grand opening. The contrast between the white flakes and the restored historic facade created an almost magical image, as if nature itself was blessing this new beginning. Emma adjusted the pearl necklace that Eleanor had given her that morning, a family piece that had once belonged to Charlotte Westfield. "To remember that some traditions are worth keeping," Eleanor had said, "especially those that connect us to the strong women who came before us." The center's main hall was unrecognizable. The walls, once peeling, now displayed a careful curation of local and international art. Students in the Brooklyn pilot program had contributed impressive installations, proving that talent and opportunity, when brought together, could create magic. "It's surreal to think it all started with a humiliation at the plaza," Catherine Walsh commented, approaching Emma. "Look at you now. You turned a social scandal into a cultural revolution." Charles, across the room, was talking to a group of investors, but his eyes were constantly searching for Emma. She looked stunning in an emerald green dress that made her red hair shine like fire under the salon lights. More important than her appearance, however, was the natural confidence she radiated. No longer the shy teacher hiding in the West Wing, but a transformative force in her own right. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor took the microphone, her voice carrying decades of social authority. "Welcome to the opening of the Eleanor Westfield Arts Center. While I am deeply honored by the name, this place represents much more than my personal legacy. It represents a new era for the Westfields, one that embraces not only business excellence, but also social responsibility and cultural transformation." The audience, a unique mix of business elite and local artists, applauded enthusiastically. Emma noticed Victoria Bennett discreetly positioned at the back of the room, her face revealing a complex mix of regret and admiration. Charles took the stage next, adjusting the microphone with an ease that previously masked insecurity but now reflected genuine confidence. When I met Emma one rainy night in Boston, she was teaching Pride and Prejudice to a group of adults after work. I remember thinking how she made classic literature seem relevant and vibrant to people who had spent all day at work. What I didn't realize at the time was that she was teaching me a much more important lesson about authenticity and courage. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes as Charles continued. "For years, I tried to shape our lives to fit expectations that were not ours. I hid the brightest light of my life in the shadows for fear of what others would think. Today, this center represents not only a new direction for the Westfields, but my own journey of redemption." When Emma took the stage to join her husband, the silence in the room was palpable. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing not just an inauguration, but the culmination of a profound personal and social transformation. "This center," Emma began, her voice clear and confident, "is more than a space for art and education. It is a symbol of how we can transform our greatest vulnerabilities into our greatest strength. Every room in this building bears the name of a woman who contributed to the arts or education in New York, because we believe that recognizing those who came before us is just as important as creating opportunities for those who come after." The night progressed like a carefully orchestrated dream. Performances by students from the Brooklyn program mixed with performances by established artists. Conversations about mergers and acquisitions shared space with passionate discussions about painting techniques and the social impact of the arts. Close to midnight, as the last guests began to leave, Emma found Charles in the building's old library, now transformed into a reading and music room. He was standing by the window, watching the snow that continued to fall. "I thought I'd find you here," she said softly, moving closer. "Libraries seem to play an important role in our history." Charles smiled, extending his hand to her. "I remember exactly the book you were holding that first night in Boston. It was an old edition of Pride and Prejudice, with the worn blue cover. And you tried to impress by quoting Mr. Darcy." Emma laughed, lacing her fingers through his. "Little did I know that I was about to experience my own version of Pride Redemption," Charles replied, pulling her closer. The moment was interrupted by Eleanor, who silently entered the library. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might like to see this." She handed Emma an envelope. "Catherine just handed it to me. It's the first official donation to the center's scholarship program." The check, signed by the Walsh Foundation, was accompanied by a simple note: "To remember that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest blessings. With admiration, Catherine." As snow continued to fall on Manhattan, 3 generations of Westfield transformation contemplated the future with a clarity that only comes after facing and overcoming one's shadows. The Eleanor Westfield Arts Center was not just a renovated building, it was a beacon of hope, a testament to the transformative power of love when it is strong enough to overcome pride and prejudice. And so, in the library where it all began and ended, Emma and Charles Westfield found not only redemption, but also a new beginning, one that promised to be as bright as the lights of Manhattan reflected in the freshly fallen snow.